Isn't it amazing the sort of twists and turns that a hockey season can take? The way that the Edmonton Oilers started the 2021-22 season, I don't think that anybody in the league could have thought that the Edmonton Oilers could have ever ended up where they are now. Their loss to the Ottawa Senators last night marked the 6th consecutive loss for this team. The team that arguably has the two best players in the world playing for it. That is not a place where this team should be. Now, in the interest of fairness, there are a lot of different things that have contributed to this that probably aren't being given, their due consideration in a lot of this discussion. Nobody really expected all of those injuries on the left defense to pile up at the same time, but they all did, and of course that was going to have a negative effect on this team. And of course, nobody must have expected COVID to become such an issue in this Edmonton Oilers season, taking down multiple players at a time. These are both things that really don't seem to make much of an appearance in the commentary about the Edmonton Oilers' current situation. But there are lots of people that are keen to point the finger anywhere it is that they can think of to point it. They're pointing it at the goaltenders. They're pointing it at players. They're pointing at the coaching staff and the management staff. And the people who have never been happy with this team, no matter how successful the team was on the ice. The people that were, no matter how successful they were out calling for the heads of Mike Holland and Dave Tippett, well, they are happier than pigs in shit right now. And the rest of the fan base, of course, they're not happy at all, and all they want is for this team to win. And right now, it just seems like this is a team that cannot win. They've tasted their first their first share of adversity during this season. And it's really looking like this team, almost from top to bottom throughout this roster, this team is looking awfully fragile. And right now, it's not just the team that looks fragile. It's not just the fan base that looks extremely fragile right now. And honestly, most of them do. But also the management is starting to look fragile. And that is not a great place for a team to be. So after a recent loss, Dave Tippett came out and he was asked exactly what it was that he thought that caused the team to lose that night, and what it is that's been causing the team to lose over these past several weeks. And he pointed the finger at one person, and he basically said that it was all Mikko Koskinen's fault. Of course, goaltending pretty often does make the difference in hockey, and it's always going to be a factor in whether or not a team is successful or unsuccessful. And yes, you can make the case that over the past several years, over the past decade or more, the goaltending for the Edmonton Oilers just has not been good enough. Now, in a few previous videos, I have talked about exactly where the goaltending problem actually stems from, and no, it doesn't start with Mikko Koskinen. And I have talked about different ways that the team could solve that, and actually it doesn't begin with getting rid of Mikko Koskinen. But the one way that you don't solve that problem is for the coach to go out in public and put all of the blame on the back of one player. Especially when all of the facts surrounding the team's current skid do not support the argument that one player is responsible for it. Hockey is a team sport, it's a team effort. And quite frankly, for Dave Tippett to come out and just put that on the back of one player, that's a serious problem for this coach. That is a serious lapse in leadership. If he's going to go around and he's going to start to put the spotlight on individual players, he absolutely should not have been doing that in the media, and he certainly should not be doing it in public. But unfortunately, he's not the only individual, I should say, who has had a serious lapse in their leadership skills surrounding this situation. The team's captain, Connor McDavid, does have an obligation to stand up to the coaching staff and stand up for the players in these sorts of situations. That is a big part of the captain's job. And the player that actually came out and did speak up on Mikko Koskinen's behalf, unfortunately, was not Connor McDavid. It was Mike Smith. Nobody should really be too surprised about that. Mike Smith is the oldest guy in the locker room. He is looked to for leadership. It is entirely possible that he might be the best leader amongst the goaltenders in hockey right now. So really, nobody should be surprised that Mike Smith stood up for Mikko Koskinen. But the simple fact of the matter is that when it comes down to Mike Smith to do that instead of the team's captain, this team has an obvious leadership problem at the captain position. Now, I'm sure that there are plenty of people out there who would come out and say that it's probably inappropriate for the team captain to go out and contradict the team's coach, in the media. But the simple fact of the matter is that it was already inappropriate for Dave Tippett. Now, I'm sure there are all sorts of people out there who would say that it would be inappropriate for the team's captain to go out and contradict the coach in the media. But the simple fact of the matter is that it was already inappropriate for Dave Tippett to go out and try to finger one player to blame for all of this, particularly the goaltender. And Mikko Koskinen, by the way, was entirely correct in what he came out and said later. When he came out and pointed out that, one of the problems with this team is just, a lack of goal scoring, particularly from the bottom of the... And Mikko Koskinen was entirely correct when he came out and observed that one of the problems with this team right now does not actually have anything to do with him. One of the problems with this team right now is the lack of goal scoring in particular games. In particular, a lack of goal scoring from the bottom six of the forward. Come on. And the one thing that Mikko Koskinen was absolutely correct to point out was when he came out and pointed, and one of the things that Mikko Koskinen was absolutely correct to point out was when he came out and observed that in a lot of those games, there was not a problem at the goaltender position. There was a problem with a lack of scoring, particularly a lack of scoring from the bottom six amongst the forwards. Mikko Koskinen is a goaltender. He doesn't score goals. He's entirely right to point this out, and he has every right to defend himself. It just speaks to a serious problem with the leadership core of this team and with this organization that Mikko Koskinen and Mike Smith were the ones who had to come out and speak up, and that really any player had to come out and speak up for the goaltenders at all.